He mocked her in front of millionaires, offering his entire salary if she could translate one ancient line. Everyone laughed, until she opened her mouth. What she revealed not only shattered his ego, but exposed a truth no one in that golden room was ready to face. Who was this maid? And why did her silence shake an empire? Stay with us, because the twist will leave you speechless. The chandelier above sparkled like icicles frozen mid-fall. Crystal glasses clinked softly across the vast mahogany table. Laughter echoed through the marble hall of the Alcott estate, where wealth painted every inch in gold and silence obeyed command. The millionaire, Gregory Alcott, leaned back in his velvet chair, swirling aged wine in a goblet worth more than a month's rent. His guests, executives, influencers, and foreign investors, hung on his every word. Servants moved like ghosts, silent and invisible. Then came her. Elena. The maid with quiet eyes and a spine made of steel. She carried herself not like one beneath them but like one who chose to be there. Gregory's gaze fell on her as she placed a fresh linen napkin beside his plate. He smirked. "Translate this," he said, lifting a dusty leather-bound book from the table. His voice rang with arrogance, thick with amusement. "And my salary is yours." A murmur rippled through the guests. They chuckled, mocking. Even the pianist in the corner paused, hands hovering over the keys. The room froze, waiting for her humiliation. The title on the book was ancient, Greek, obscure. His challenge was no joke. Elena's eyes moved across the page. For a brief moment, the firelight caught the edge of her name tag, frayed from too many wash cycles. She stepped forward. One breath. Then she spoke. Her voice was calm, measured. She read aloud in perfect Attic Greek. The room fell silent. Then she translated. Word for word. Line after line. The story unfolded like silk from her mouth. About a king who lost everything chasing pride. About a servant who warned him. But the king scoffed. Until it was too late. Gregory's smile cracked. A single bead of sweat rolled down his temple. She closed the book. Silence. You could hear the clock ticking above the mantel. One guest whispered, "Where did she learn that?" Elena turned slightly. "I studied ancient languages at the University of Athens," she said softly. "I took this job to send my brother to school." Gregory opened his mouth. No words came. His hand trembled as he set down the goblet. His empire, built on power and perception, had just been disarmed by a housemaid. And the eyes of the room, once adoring, now turned. Not toward him, but toward her. Elena stepped back, unshaken, unapologetic. And for the first time, Gregory Alcott saw someone he could neither buy nor command. His voice cracked. "Who are you?" She looked at him. Not with spite, but with knowing. "Someone who never needed your salary." Then she walked away, leaving only silence and shattered pride behind her. The air felt different now, colder, sharper. As if truth had finally been spoken in a room that had forgotten what it sounded like. Gregory stared at the book, but the words no longer made sense, because the meaning was never in the letters. It was in the lesson, and he had just failed it, badly. The guests watched. Their expressions changed. No one laughed now. The pianist began to play again, but even the music seemed unsure, because nothing was the same anymore. And Gregory Alcott knew. He had just been taught by the very hands he refused to see. By a woman whose story had just begun. In a room built to keep voices like hers quiet. But tonight, hers echoed the loudest. And it would not be forgotten. Ever. The grand dining hall no longer felt like his domain. The weight of eyes, once flattering, now pressed against him like cold iron. He adjusted his cufflinks, suddenly aware of how empty gestures felt. Elena's footsteps faded behind the corridor doors, but her presence lingered. A woman at the table, a diplomat, leaned in and whispered. That was the most valuable moment of the evening. Her voice cut deeper than the wine Gregory had so proudly poured. Across the room, a tech-mogul tapped his glass, clearing his throat. "I would like to speak with her," he said plainly. Gregory's stomach turned. She had shifted the power in the room without raising her voice. No anger. No rebellion. Just truth. Articulated with elegance and command. The irony hung in the air like a heavy curtain. Gregory, the master of deals, had been outmatched at his own table. Not by a rival executive. Not by an investor. But by a woman paid to polish silver and serve bread. A silent humility filled the hall. It did not belong to him. In the hallway beyond the dining room, Elena reached the back stairs. Her hands trembled now only slightly. But not from fear. From release. She had spoken. She had dared. And the echo of it had reached further than she ever planned. In her small room above the kitchen, a journal lay open beside a second-hand Greek lexicon. Its pages were filled with notes, footnotes, dreams that once seemed buried beneath uniforms and schedules. She sat beside the window and watched the estate gardens below. Moonlight spilled like silver across the hedges. She exhaled slowly. She had not humiliated Gregory. He had done that himself. With every sneer, every assumption, every careless challenge meant to amuse his guests. Downstairs the guests began to disperse. But not without murmurs. Not without glances at the doors through which Elena had vanished. The story would be told. Over calls. At conferences. In boardrooms. Not about Gregory's wealth. But about the night a maid answered in Greek. And reminded them what intelligence truly looked like. He sat alone now. In a room meant for royalty. But stripped bare by a truth he never saw coming. The chandelier still sparkled. The silverware still gleamed. But the shine no longer belonged to him. Because knowledge, real knowledge, cannot be bought. And respect, true respect, cannot be demanded. It must be earned. And Elena? She had just earned the world's attention. Without raising her voice. Without stepping out of line. Without asking for permission. She had spoken as if she belonged. Because she did. And Gregory Alcott was finally learning to listen. Not out of choice, but out of necessity. Because sometimes, the most powerful voices come from the ones the world tries hardest to silence. And when they speak, everything changes. Upstairs, Elena folded her apron and placed it neatly on the edge of her bed. The fabric, faded and worn, felt lighter in her hands now. Not because the work had changed, but because she had. She glanced at her phone where a single message blinked. A scholarship acceptance. Deferred for years. Now finally within reach. She stared at the screen. At her name. Not maid. Not house staff. But Elena M. Petrakis, graduate candidate, linguistics department. She smiled. Not the polite, rehearsed smile of service, but one born from something deeper. Victory. Below, Gregory stood alone in the gallery. His reflection stared back at him from a wall-length mirror. It no longer looked impressive. It looked unfamiliar. He had built his empire on the illusion of superiority. Yet it crumbled with a single sentence in a language he once mocked. A slow realization washed over him. His salary could command nations, but not her mind, not her dignity, not her presence. He had offered her the world thinking it a joke. But she had already owned more than he understood. The mirror reflected not just his face, but the hollowness behind it. No depth, no challenge, no soul. He turned away but the image stayed in his head. Elena's voice, her poise, the effortless way she dismantled his ego. Back in her room, she gathered her few belongings. A photo of her mother, her brother's last letter from university, and the old copy of the Republic she carried like armor. She placed the book from the dinner table next to it, the one Gregory had thrown at her like a test. She would keep it, not as a trophy, but as a symbol, not of him, but of the moment she reclaimed her narrative. The next morning the estate buzzed with whispers. Guests checked out earlier than planned. An investor canceled a second meeting. One of them left a note behind. To the woman who reminded us all. That knowledge humbles even the powerful. Gregory read the note 3 times. Then folded it into his jacket pocket. A jacket that suddenly felt too tight. The walls of his mansion, once impressive, now closed in. Paintings looked gaudy. Furniture felt cold. Nothing whispered pride anymore. Only discomfort. He paced the hall like a man searching for something he had never needed until now. Clarity. But clarity, like respect, does not come with wealth. It comes with awakening. And he was far behind. Meanwhile, Elena stepped out of the gates. Not in uniform. Not as a servant. But as a scholar. A woman with purpose. The wind touched her hair as she moved forward. Beyond the estate. Beyond the night. Into a future she would now write herself. Word by word. Chapter by chapter. On her own terms. The city welcomed her with a quiet hum. Not the roar of engines or horns, but the pulse of a world waiting to be seen through new eyes. Elena walked past bookstores and cafes. Past busy sidewalks where no one knew her name. And for the first time that anonymity felt like freedom. She paused at a library window, where an old poster read, "Language is power. Speak it. Own it." A small smile curved at her lips. She stepped inside. Dust danced in shafts of morning light. Rows of books towered like silent sentinels. each holding a world, a voice, a revolution. She moved through the aisles as if returning home, not searching for escape, but for fuel. Pages whispered to her, not with commands, but with possibility. In the corner she found an open desk. She sat, pulled a notepad from her bag, wrote the first line. "Do not ask if I belong here." The pen moved fast. No hesitation. No fear. "I speak your language, and my own." Back at the estate, Gregory sat in his office, surrounded by contracts, ledgers, securities. None of them offered comfort. None of them answered the question burning in his chest. How did I miss her? He opened his laptop, searched her name. Nothing. No social media. No interviews. Just a single academic paper, published years ago under a different name, titled, "The Invisible Mind, Intelligence Behind the Curtain of Class." He read it once, then again. Each paragraph felt like it had been written for him. Or maybe, against him. A knock at the door interrupted. It was his assistant. "Sir, should I begin looking for her replacement?" Gregory hesitated, then slowly shook his head. No, no one could replace her. Not in function. Not in form. Not in impact. He stood and looked out the window, where the sun lit the horizon with silent brilliance. A maid had walked through his empire and left it in pieces. Not from destruction, but from truth. He saw now what he had never looked for. Not weakness, but strength that chose silence until provoked. And when it spoke, it rewrote the rules. In the library, Elena's phone buzzed. An email. Subject line: "We would be honored to publish your next paper." She closed her eyes. Not in disbelief, but in gratitude. Because she knew this was only the beginning. The beginning of a life not dictated by uniforms or commands, but by ideas, and the courage to share them. She stood, picked up her bag, and walked toward the door, toward the world, with knowledge as her armor, and silence finally behind her. Outside the library, the sky was painted in warm hues of amber and gold. The world felt wide open, alive, not as a place of obstacles, but as a canvas. Elena walked with purpose, not hurried, not burdened, but certain. Each step was a quiet declaration. I'm not who you thought I was. I'm far more. She passed a newsstand where a folded magazine caught her eye. The headline read, "The Dinner That Changed Everything, A Lesson in Power and Perspective." She picked it up. There, in the center spread, a grainy photo of her from the previous night. Back straight, eyes calm, book in hand. The article beneath it was not about Gregory. It was about her. A nameless woman no longer anonymous. A scholar. A symbol. But as she read, her face remained still. Because none of this was news to her. She had always known who she was. It was the world that had forgotten to look deeper. She returned the magazine gently to the shelf. Fame was never her goal. Her ambition lived elsewhere. In libraries. In lectures. In the moments when young minds asked questions no one dared answer. Further down the street, a small university building stood with ivy crawling along its stone. She stepped through the doors. The front desk clerk looked up. "Elena Petrakis?" She nodded. "Welcome," he said. "We have been waiting for you." Those words echoed in her chest. Not as a compliment, but as a confirmation. This was where she belonged. Not because someone finally saw her worth, but because she never needed permission to arrive. She was not stepping into a new chapter. She was writing it. And with each word, each thought, each lecture, she would challenge the next Gregory before he ever opened his mouth. Because education in its truest form is not just knowledge. It is transformation. It is truth made visible. And now, Elena was no longer translating someone else's language. She was speaking her own, loudly, clearly, and with purpose. The lecture hall buzzed with the low hum of students settling in. Some scrolled through tablets. Others adjusted their glasses or whispered quietly to one another. At the front stood a blank whiteboard, a fresh canvas waiting for a mind bold enough to fill it. Elena stepped inside. No podium. No title card. Just her presence. Measured, confident, and commanding in its quiet. Every seat slowly turned toward her. There was no announcement. No grand introduction. She uncapped a marker. Wrote 5 words in large, clear print. Power is not always visible. The room hushed. She turned to face them. Young faces. Curious. Eager. Faces that reminded her of her younger brother. She looked into the eyes of the future. And she began. "Last night I served wine to men who believed knowledge wears a suit. They were wrong. Some students leaned forward, pens poised, eyes wide. She continued. True power speaks many languages, but it does not boast. It reveals itself when tested. The room was still, not out of politeness, but reverence, because they were not just hearing a lecture. They were witnessing a story that had not been written in books. Elena paced slowly, her footsteps echoing off the walls. She told them of masks worn in plain sight, of assumptions made in golden rooms, of how language, when wielded well, can humble the proud. But she never spoke Gregory's name, because this was not his story anymore. It was hers. A hand rose in the front row. A quiet voice asked, "Why did you not tell them who you were before?" She smiled, not out of smugness, but understanding. Because some lessons are only learned when the illusion collapses. And last night, that illusion shattered. A quiet gasp swept the room. She placed the marker down, not as an end, but as an invitation. Do not wait for the world to recognize you, she said. Make your knowledge undeniable, unignorable, unshakable. The room erupted in applause. Not the kind of clapping that fades in seconds, but the kind that rises like a wave and refuses to fall. Outside the university walls, clouds rolled in slow and heavy, but within the halls, a fire had been lit. Not a fire of rebellion, but of realization. Elena gathered her notes. She was no longer the maid who stood behind chairs. She was the mind that now stood in front of them. And with every word she spoke, another mind awakened. Somewhere Gregory sat in his study, the same book unopened on his desk. He still did not understand the language, but now, he understood the lesson. And Elena? She had already moved on, not to escape the past, but to shape the future. One voice at a time, one truth at a time, one classroom at a time. The semester moved forward, and with it so did Elena. Each day her lectures drew more students. Not because of titles, not because of fame, but because truth has a resonance that no wealth can imitate. Word spread beyond the campus. Academics wrote about her. Journalists asked for interviews. She declined most, not out of pride, but because she knew that silence, when chosen, is more powerful than any spotlight. One afternoon after class, she sat beneath an old olive tree near the courtyard. The same tree where scholars once debated ideas centuries ago. She opened her journal and began to write. Not notes, not translations, but her story. Not the version whispered by tabloids. Not the one centered around Gregory, but the one only she could tell. A story of language, of dignity, of battles fought with brilliance, not noise. And as she wrote, her heart was still, because she had not just proven herself to a room of millionaires. She had reclaimed herself. In another part of the city, Gregory stood at a conference podium. His speech, practiced and polished, landed flat. Applause came, but not the kind that mattered. He knew it. They all did. His world remained rich, but not respected. Because respect, once lost to arrogance, is not easily earned back. Later that night, he sat alone by his fireplace, book in hand. He opened to the first page and began to read, slowly, carefully. Not to prove anything to anyone, but perhaps to finally understand. And that was her gift to him. Not vengeance, but awareness. Back at the university, Elena closed her journal and looked toward the horizon. The sky burned orange, melting into violet. She rose, bag over shoulder, chin lifted. She walked away from the tree, footsteps soft, purpose loud. She was no longer the woman who served behind the scenes. She was the architect of her story, the author of her voice, and wherever that voice would go, classrooms, books, stages, or simply into the ears of one who finally listened, it would carry with it the weight of wisdom, the grace of humility, and the quiet, immovable strength of someone who never needed to prove her worth, only to remind the world of it. And in doing so, she changed it, gracefully, forever.